Picture this. April 23rd, 2023. A factory floor in the Ruhr Valley sits silent. Not because the workers walked out, not because the orders dried up, but because the CEO cannot afford to flip the switches. The electricity bill has tripled, the gas contract has expired, and the government just turned off the last nuclear reactor. We've been told this is about climate change. We've been told this is about saving the planet. But strip away the press releases and the ministry statements. What you're looking at is a $500 billion accounting error. Germany didn't transition to green energy. It liquidated its industrial base. And the ledger tells the real story. This is the tale of how Europe's economic engine became a cautionary tale. How a nation built on precision engineering made the sloppiest financial mistake of the 21st century. And how ideology, when it collides with the balance sheet, always loses. Let's go back to the beginning. Back when Germany looked invincible. 2010. Germany is the export champion of the world. Its factories hum 24 hours a day. BMW rolls off assembly lines in Bavaria. BASF churns out chemicals in Ludwigshafen. Siemens powers half the planet. The Deutschmark is gone, replaced by the euro, but German efficiency remains the gold standard. Tourists flood Berlin. The economy is growing. Unemployment is falling. Angela Merkel, a physicist with a doctorate in quantum chemistry, sits in the chancellery. She is pragmatic. She is data-driven, and she just extended the lifespan of Germany's nuclear power plants. 25% of the nation's electricity comes from the atom. It is clean. It is reliable. It is cheap. The plan is simple. Use nuclear as a bridge while renewables scale up over decades. Germany is engineering the future, methodically, rationally, but beneath the surface, the foundation is rotting. Because energy policy in Germany isn't just about watts and volts, it's about politics. The Green Party, Die Grünen, has been protesting nuclear energy since Chernobyl. They've waited decades for their moment. And on March 11, 2011, the Earth delivers it to them. The Tohoku earthquake strikes Japan. A tsunami slams into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. Reactors melt down. The world watches in horror. And 5,000 miles away, in a country with no seismic activity and no tsunamis, panic sets in. The anti-nuclear movement in Germany explodes. Protesters fill the streets. The tabloids run apocalyptic headlines. And Angela Merkel, the scientist, makes a decision that defies science. She announces the Atomausstieg, the nuclear phase-out. All reactors will be shut down by 2022. 8 of them are switched off immediately, just like that. Gone. This is the original sin. The moment the balance sheet starts bleeding. Let me explain why this is economic suicide. Germany's nuclear plants were paid off. The construction debt was settled decades ago. They produced electricity at roughly 3 cents per kilowatt hour. They ran 24/7, rain or shine, wind or no wind. They were the backbone of the industrial grid. Now imagine you're running a factory. You depend on stable, cheap power. Suddenly the government tells you they're tearing out the furnace in the middle of winter. Don't worry, they say. We'll replace it with solar panels and wind turbines. Eventually, you ask the obvious question, what do we use in the meantime? They don't have an answer, because the wind doesn't blow on demand. The sun doesn't shine at night, and Germany, located in northern Europe, isn't exactly blessed with endless sunshine. So what happens? The gap has to be filled, and it gets filled with the dirtiest fuel on the planet, lignite coal. Germany begins tearing down villages to expand coal mines. Yes, you read that correctly. Wind farms are dismantled to make room for coal pits. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The country that wanted to save the environment ends up burning more fossil fuels than before, and the cost? It starts climbing fast. Between 2010 and 2020, Germany pours over 200 billion euros into renewable subsidies. Every German household pays a surcharge on their electricity bill to fund the transition. It's called the EEM, the Renewable Energy Levy. Electricity prices skyrocket. By 2020, German households are paying 33 cents per kilowatt hour. In the United States, it's 13 cents. In France, it's 18. German industry is bleeding. But the government insists this is the price of progress. They point to the wind farms dotting the countryside. They point to the solar panels on the rooftops. Look, they say, we're leading the world, except the carbon emissions barely move. Why? Because baseload power doesn't come from intermittent sources. It comes from something that runs all the time. And Germany killed the one thing that could do that without carbon. Nuclear was the bridge. They burned it. Now they're drowning. But it gets worse, because Germany made a second fatal mistake, one that would turn the crisis into a catastrophe. They became addicted to Russian gas. Natural gas is the perfect backup fuel. It burns cleaner than coal. You can fire up the turbines quickly when the wind dies. And it provides industrial heat, which German chemical plants desperately need. There's just one problem. Germany doesn't have much natural gas. So where do they get it? Russia. For decades, Germany pursued a policy called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. The logic was seductive. If we buy their gas, they'll need our money. Economic interdependence will prevent conflict. We'll tie our economies together so tightly that war becomes unthinkable. It was the ultimate bet on rationality. And Vladimir Putin took that bet and shoved it down their throats. Germany built two massive pipelines under the Baltic Sea, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. They were designed to pump Siberian gas directly into German industry. Cheap, abundant, reliable. By 2021, 55% of Germany's natural gas came from Russia. BASF, the chemical giant, ran its entire operation on Russian molecules. Volkswagen, Bayer, ThyssenKrupp, all of them were hooked. The German economy was a junkie, and Putin held the needle. The warnings came early. Poland warned them. Ukraine screamed at them. The Baltic states begged them to wake up. And in 2018, at the United Nations, Donald Trump stood at the podium and said it out loud. Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. The camera cut to the German delegation. They were smirking, laughing. They thought he was an idiot. Fast forward to February 24th, 2022. Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. The smiles disappeared. Suddenly, the policy of change through trade looked less like diplomacy and more like treason. Russia throttled the gas supply. Prices went vertical. Spot market prices for natural gas increased by 1,000%. Let that sink in. 1,000%? A factory that paid €1 million a month for energy was now staring at a €10 million bill. You can't absorb that. You can't pass it on. You shut down. And that's exactly what happened. German industry began to collapse. The government had to bail out the utility giant Uniper to the tune of €30 billion just to keep the grid from imploding. They spent hundreds of billions more subsidizing household energy bills to prevent riots. And here's the punchline. Robert Habeck, the Green Party economic minister, the man who spent his career opposing fossil fuels, had to fly around the world begging for liquefied natural gas. He went to Qatar. He went to the United Arab Emirates. He went to United States. And every contract he signed was more expensive than the Russian pipeline gas. Because LNG has to be cooled, shipped across the ocean, and regasified. It costs twice as much, maybe 3 times. The era of cheap German manufacturing was over, forever. The competitive advantage that made in Germany a global powerhouse was secretly subsidized by cheap Russian hydrocarbons. Now that subsidy was gone, and the cracks in the foundation turned into canyons. Let's talk about BASF, the largest chemical company in the world. Their Ludwigshafen site consumes as much natural gas as the entire country of Switzerland. For decades, this was the beating heart of German industry. Fertilizers, plastics, pharmaceuticals, vitamins, the stuff that keeps the modern world running. But in 2023, the heart started failing. BASF announced permanent downsizing in Europe. 2,600 jobs cut at the flagship plant. One of their ammonia facilities shut down for good. And where are they moving production? China. They're building a $10 billion complex in Zhanjiang. Why? Because energy in China is cheap, and the government isn't guilt-tripping you for using it. BASF isn't alone. Miele, the appliance maker, is moving production to Poland. Volkswagen is building battery factories in Canada and the United States, chasing subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. This is deindustrialization, not structural change, not adaptation. It's a hollowing out. Germany built its wealth on making things: steel, chemicals, cars, machines. If you take away the ability to make things competitively, what's left? Tourism, beer, and a really nice museum. The CEO of BASF didn't mince words. Martin Bruder-Miller said Europe is becoming increasingly uncompetitive. That's CEO speak for we're leaving before the ship sinks. These aren't just jobs. These are high-paying, middle-class union jobs, the kind that hold a society together. When the steel mills close, they don't come back. When the chemical plants move to China, they stay in China. Germany is sacrificing its industrial base to meet carbon targets that the rest of the world is ignoring. It's economic unilateral disarmament. Now let's talk about the grid. Because even if you generate a lot of wind power, you have to move it. And Germany has a geography problem. The wind blows in the north, where the ocean is. The factories are in the south, where Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg sit. To get the power from point A to point B, you need massive high-voltage transmission lines. The biggest one is called Südlink. It was supposed to be the main artery of the energy transition. Original completion date, 2022. Just in time for the nuclear phase-out. Their reality? It's stuck in bureaucratic hell. Endless lawsuits, NIMBY protests. Not in my backyard. Local communities didn't want the towers, so the government agreed to bury the cables underground. That tripled the cost and delayed the project by years. The new completion date is 2028, maybe. So what happens today when a storm hits the North Sea and the turbines spin like crazy? You have too much power in the north and no way to send it south. The grid overloads. To prevent a blackout, the operators tell the wind farms to shut down. But here's the kicker. The wind farms still get paid. It's called redispatch. I call it ghost electricity. German consumers are paying wind farms billions of euros not to produce power. In 2022 alone, congestion management costs hit 4.2 billion euros. You're paying for electricity you don't get. Meanwhile, because that power can't reach the south, the factories in Bavaria fire up coal and gas plants to keep running. You're paying twice. Once for the green energy you didn't receive. Once for the dirty energy you had to use instead. It's a Rube Goldberg machine of incompetence. And who pays? The grandmother opening her mailbox to find a bill that's doubled in 3 years. By 2023, the German government realized burning coal wasn't great optics. They needed a new win. They needed to decarbonize homes. Enter the Heizungsgesetz. The heating law. Economic Minister Robert Habeck pushed through legislation that effectively banned new oil and gas boilers starting in 2024. The replacement? Heat pumps. Now, heat pumps are excellent technology. They're air conditioners running in reverse, super efficient. But they work best in modern, well-insulated homes with underfloor heating. Do you know what most German homes are? Old, drafty. Built with brick walls thick enough to stop a tank. To make a heat pump work in a 1950s German house, you need to rip up the floors, replace the radiators, and insulate the walls. The cost can easily run 20 to 50,000 euros. The government offered subsidies, sure, but the messaging was a disaster. It felt like forced expropriation. Grandma, living on her pension in a paid-off house, was suddenly told she might need to take out a loan just to stay warm. The public reaction wasn't anger, it was fury. The tabloid Bild ran headlines calling it the heating hammer. Habeck's approval ratings collapsed. The far-right AfD party surged in the polls by promising to leave your boiler alone. The government nearly fell apart. They had to water down the law significantly. Delays, loopholes, exemptions, but the damage was done. The heat pump industry, which had ramped up production expecting a boom, saw sales crash in 2024. Why? Because everyone panicked and bought brand new gas boilers before the ban kicked in, locking in fossil fuel usage for another 20 years. It was a master class in policy failure. Now the German government will tell you their emissions are dropping, and technically they're right. In 2023, Germany's carbon emissions fell to the lowest level in 70 years. But let's look at why. Was it the wind turbines? The heat pumps? The solar panels? No, it was because the factories stopped running. Energy-intensive production fell by nearly 20%. When you shut down steel mills, chemical plants, and paper factories, your emissions go down. Congratulations, you saved the planet by destroying your economy. This is the equivalent of losing weight by amputating your leg. Yes, the scale says you're lighter. but you're also bleeding out. The head of Germany's Federal Audit Office called this out explicitly. Germany is not on track for a sustainable transition. It's on track for economic contraction masquerades as climate success. And it gets worse. Because Germany shut down nuclear, its electricity grid is now dirtier than France. France gets 70% of its power from nuclear. Their carbon intensity is around 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Germany, even on a good day, it hovers around 300 to 400 grams. So when a German buys an electric car to save the planet, they're charging it with electricity that's 6 to 8 times dirtier than what a French person uses. The green energy leader of Europe is actually one of the biggest polluters, simply because they refuse to accept that nuclear energy is zero carbon. So here we are, late 2025. The German economy is stagnating. It was the only major G7 economy to shrink in 2023. It barely moved in 2024. The German model, cheap energy in, high quality, exports out, is broken. The political landscape is fractured. The Green Party is fighting for survival. The industries that made Germany rich are looking for exit strategies, and the world is watching. Developing nations like India and Vietnam are looking at Germany and saying, yeah, we're not doing that. They're building coal plants. They're building nuclear reactors. They're prioritizing reliability and affordability over ideology. Germany wanted to be a role model, and they succeeded. They became the perfect example of what not to do. They showed the world that you cannot run a modern industrial economy on intermittent, weather-dependent energy alone, at least not without massive, reliable base load backup. And if you destroy your clean backup before your new backup is ready, you fall off the bridge. Sovereignty is solvency. And Germany is learning that lesson the hard way. Is there a way out? Possibly. Germany still has world-class engineers, and for now, deep pockets. There's talk of restarting nuclear plants, but the obstacles are immense. Reactors were mothballed, fuel chains dismantled, skilled staff dispersed. Restarting would take years and cost billions. Hydrogen is the other hope, the dream fuel, but green hydrogen is expensive, inefficient, and lacks infrastructure. It's a gamble, a costly one. Meanwhile, companies keep leaving. Layoffs mount. Energy bills stay high. Inflation bites. The middle class shrinks and political extremes rise. This is what happens when ideology overrides arithmetic and physics is ignored. Let's zoom out for a moment and grasp the scale of this mistake. 500 billion euros. That's not an abstract number. That's hospitals not built, schools underfunded, pensions strained, infrastructure delayed. An entire generation's prosperity poured into an experiment that failed. And the damage isn't only financial. It's social. It's political. Trust between citizens and the state has fractured. Faith and expertise has eroded. Confidence that leaders will protect livelihoods has been shaken. Germany wagered everything on a vision, a world powered by wind and sun, no nuclear, no coal, no Russian gas. It was elegant, moral, but visions don't keep the lights on, kilowatts do. And kilowatts obey physics energy density, capacity factors, grid stability. You cannot negotiate with thermodynamics. You cannot subsidize intermittency away, and you cannot run an industrial economy on hope. The ledger always wins. History is written by accountants, not activists, and the balance sheet is unforgiving. This is no longer just Germany's problem. It's a warning. Energy is the foundation of civilization. Without cheap, reliable power, you don't have an economy, you have a museum. Germany paid 500 billion euros to learn that lesson. The rest of the world should learn it for free if it's willing to look at the numbers.